So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, broadcast and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and American League Baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Let me start that again. I'm sorry. Josh Dorfman is one smart guy, and he's pretty lucky, too. His first book, The Lazy Environmentalist, was published in 2007. It told regular people how they could save the environment, go green, and soothe their conscience with a modicum of effort. It was a success, so he embarked on a second, The Lazy Environmentalist on a Budget. This is where the luck came in, I think. I'm guessing that when he started the second book, the economy wasn't quite in the tank the way it is now. Well, he wound up writing and organizing a volume of information that gets to the heart of the green movement and published it at a perfect time. That is when saving the environment and saving dough are high on an awful lot of our lists. So, smart guy Josh Dorfman, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you, Bob. Great to be here.
Glad to have you. I, of course, am the lazy talk show host. You're the lazy environmentalist. Who knew we'd have so much in common?
You know, it's funny, with the lazy environmentalist, I tend to bring out the lazy aspects of lots of different people across all walks of life.
What is the laziest that you've run across? And in what ways have you found lazy people?
Oh, man. Well, it's, it actually goes two ways. Sometimes when I tell people I'm the lazy environmentalist, sometimes I'll say, oh, my God, I love that. I recycle, and I take my reusable shopping bags to the grocery store, and I turn off all my lights, and I'm thinking, there's nothing lazy about that. I don't know. That's all good. That's good stuff. And then sometimes we've actually, I'm trying to think, what's the laziest thing we've done? Well, I'm making a TV show right now that'll be on the Sundance Channel this June, and so we were working with a family on the show that just had so much trash that the father of this family has to stand each week, or each time they take the trash, he has to stand on top of the pile to try and get it into the garbage can, which struck me as that took effort, but they certainly were pretty lazy in what they were getting rid of and the lack of recycling.
It sounds like there's a different problem at work there, though.
That may be.
Maybe some underlying mental issues that need tending. Are you less lazy about maybe helping people out with stuff like that?
I actually, it's fine. It's I enjoy it. The thing that just really resonates with me about this brand and the lazy environmentalist and this dialogue is really just saying, all right, we are the way we are, and instead of placing some sort of environmental value judgment on that or making people feel bad or guilt-tripping, I'm just really trying to figure out how can we get everyday regular Americans to become more environmentally conscious. What is it really going to take? So it's pretty cool because it's a dialogue that doesn't say, hey, all right, I'm this big environmentalist, you have to listen to me. What I'm really trying to say is, you tell me, how are you living your life? And then I'm going to try and find ways to make it easier for you to be a little more environmentally conscious. That's all.
Now you make me sad. I was really hoping that you were generally lazy.
Well, I am generally lazy in my personal habits. In fact, the Lazy Environmentalist came about because I had started this eco-friendly furniture company, which I still run, called Vivavi, and I had one employee when I started it, and the last day that we were working together, because I was moving the company from D.C. up to New York City, and this woman was staying in D.C., she took that as an opportunity to really essentially just tear me apart for being a really lousy environmentalist. She's like, you're selling these green products, it's all about, I know what you're trying to do, it's modern design, it's eco-friendly, but you're always in the shower, it's a pain for you to recycle, you were going to throw your bed out, I took it to the homeless shelter, you don't talk like an environmentalist, you don't act like an environmentalist, you're terrible. And so the thing was, I knew exactly what she was talking about because I happened to be that way. So I wrote a blog entry the following day or a couple of days later called The Lazy Environmentalist. And I wrote, I get it. I believe in global warming. I believe this is happening. I think climate change is happening. And regardless of that, we have issues with our water quality, with our food system, with our air. But I take long showers because I do my best thinking in the shower. I know I'm using a lot of water. I know I'm using a lot of energy, but I'm probably going to do that regardless of, as you can tell me I'm a terrible person, but I'm still going to do it. So how can we figure out ways for me to reduce the impact of that shower? Can I use a low-flow shower head? There's some really good ones now. Can we run a solar panel out the window to heat the thing? The price of that is starting to come down, although it's still pretty pricey. But what can we realistically do to make it easy for people to green their lives? Because people really aren't going to change all that much, or not in the immediate, not in the short term. Change is hard. Change takes time. How do we start to make it easy for people to make better choices today?
Oh, you make it sound so easy. And you know what, that's the thing I like about the book, actually, is it really, it does not take a lot of effort. You really make it seem so easy to be green and save dough. I mean, I think that's an amazing part of this book.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Well, you're welcome.
I think the thing about the book that gets me most excited is that I feel like there's a lot of innovation in this book, and that people will read the book and be like, wow, I had no idea that, if I'm a college student, that there's a website called Chegg.com, C-H-E-G-G, where I can rent textbooks for a fraction of the price every semester and then just send them back to the company. I can save a lot of money, which is really the point of the company, but the byproduct of that is that if you're renting textbooks, you're not consuming, you're not buying new textbooks, you're not cutting down trees every semester just to get your textbooks. It's actually better for the planet too, and it's going right back to your wallet. You're saving money at the same time. And there's so many of these really interesting services and companies starting to come to market that I love writing about them, because when people hear about them, they're like, oh man, that's just cool. There's this website swapstyle.com where I can trade my clothing with fashionistas all around the world. So if I want to refresh my wardrobe without having to A, spend money, and B, consume, and consuming is where we create our environmental footprint, I can do that. And it's basically like taking a living room swap you'd have with your friends and using the power of the internet to trade with people all around the country, even around the world. So you get what you want, you refresh your wardrobe, you save money, and you're reducing your environmental footprint at the same time. So those things just, they get me excited. I love writing about them. I like discovering them.
And Josh, what's the biggest difference between the first book and the second book?
Well, I think certainly the biggest difference is that the second book emphasizes, of course, budget living, and this came about because actually, to your intro, Bob, and to your point, I wrote this book. We had the idea for this book certainly before we got into the financial and economic pickle that we're in today. But I wrote it because when I got feedback from the first book, and I'm writing about all of this innovation and really cool things like automatic composters. You just plug in this composter like a garbage can, and it'll just compost for you, so you don't have to deal with all the hassle and the worms and stuff like that. And people were like, wow, that's really cool. And I had all these really cool things. But I'd go on the road and I would talk to different audiences, and the general feedback was, well, green's great, but it's too expensive. And it seemed like that was, and my feeling is, on the one hand, I think that's true. I think that when you ask people to spend $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 on solar panels for their home, that's expensive. And most people, they will understand, okay, in 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years, then I'll have saved enough on my energy bills that, now I'll start to actually see a net positive gain. But most people don't have the money to lay out for that. So I started thinking, man, if everyone thinks this is too expensive, and this seems to be the biggest pushback or the biggest reason that people aren't either greening their lifestyles or seeking solutions, let me see if I can write a book. And when I wrote this book, then I start to discover companies like there's one called Solar City, for example, which is based in California and is expanding now throughout the country. And what Solar City does is they said, yeah, you know what, it really doesn't make sense to ask people to spend $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 for a solar panel system for their home. So we'll just lease them one for zero money down and a low monthly payment, the lease payment, which will actually be less than the amount that they will save on their energy bill. So people can actually save money from month one with our residential solar solution. And it's like, wow, now whether I'm an environmentalist or not, I'm now thinking, man, I want to save money. I got to get the solar power from that company. And that's the innovation that's taking place today. And you can see it across many different categories that affect our lifestyles. And that's what I try and write about in the book and convey to people.
Well, I want to say if you're listening live and you'd like to talk with Josh Dorfman, author of the Lazy Environmentalist books, give us a call at 1-646-595-3135. In many ways, I mean, the budget book is certainly a screaming advertisement for green products and services. I mean, it's almost like a Yellow Pages, or Green Pages, if you will.
This is true. And what's interesting about that, and kind of the position that I sort of stake out, let's say, within the environmental movement is, I'm not necessarily saying, yes, go out and shop. But sometimes, some might say, well, you're just giving people an excuse to consume. And my feeling is, people don't need an excuse to consume. People like to consume, But the reality is that we need and like clothes, or we need and like our dishwasher, or whatever it might be. And my feeling is that since this is just simply the reality of how we live our lives, are there ways to reduce the impact of those choices? Because the one thing, to me, being an environmentalist to some degree is really saying, how can I align my personal actions, my individual actions, with a cleaner planet? And one thing that most of us do almost every day is buy stuff. We do a lot of other things, but we almost always buy stuff. So if we can limit the impact of that, then we're taking really good steps. And the other thing is that the only thing that actually causes environmental challenges, be it climate change or issues with water quality or air quality, the only thing that causes environmental issues is our consumption, whether it's consumption of oil or anything else. So there is nothing else that causes environmental damage besides what we consume and how we consume it. So really focusing on this area, I feel like is just very important, especially for Americans in our consumer society.
So Josh, if vegetarian tree huggers are to the far left and opportunistic capitalists are to the far right, where do you fall on the scale?
I'm somewhat schizophrenic, I would say, because I believe that we have to transform our economy to a more sustainable economy, and that means that every single corporation and small business eventually has to figure out how they're going to, as one CEO of it was actually Brooks Running Shoes. I met with him last week because they're doing some real interesting things to try and, as he said to me, bake sustainability or environmental action into the DNA of their company, which I thought was a really interesting way to say it. So I believe that there's opportunities to do that. I have an MBA. I went to business school, so I've seen, my friends, I struggled with this too when I came out of school, thinking, man, like, I want to do something great for the planet. These are my values. I care about this, but I don't see, now I have student loans. My friends have young families, and where are the choices? Where are the green jobs that are going to pay well, that are just going to enable me to pursue a quality of life? So on the one hand, I fully agree with that. But sometimes when I give a book talk, and this happened not too long ago, someone stood up in the audience and at the end and said, you know what, I hear what you're saying, I hear you talking about all this innovation, but I think you're full of crap. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for figuring out how to make solar panels, just more affordable. Everybody has to have them, and we don't have time. We don't have time, and we're in an environmental crisis. And everyone's like, the audience was like, oh, what's going to happen? And I said to this guy, I was like, you know what? You're right. I happen to agree with you. I happen to agree that we are in an environmental crisis, but it's kind of like, and this is a little bit sad, but it's sort of like, so what? Because who's going to listen to that dialogue? We're not ready to have that dialogue in this country. And so my feeling is, while, the lazy environmentalist is simply a dialogue and choices to say, here's the reality of how we're living our lives. What can we do today to take better steps?
Did anyone pay for inclusion in this book?
No one paid for inclusion. You'll see on the last page, or toward the end of the book, we actually dedicate a page of the book to what's called the Filter for Good campaign, and this is a campaign that Brita, the water filter company, the water pitcher company, is involved with. And the idea of the campaign is to say, use a Brita pitcher, pair it with a Filter for Good reusable water bottle, and this is a very good way to reduce plastic bottle water waste, which is a big issue in this country. And at the same time, you can save money too, because if you're spending money on bringing bottled water into your home, that can really add up, and run Brita pitcher can replace as many as 300 standard water bottles. So I put that in. I am the spokesperson for that company. And then what I do write about in the introduction, I do mention a couple of companies that I do work for who happen to be included in the book, but no one paid to be included.
Okay. Well, that's straightforward. Now,
yeah.
But that's the other thing I want to ask you about, and I'm more curious here than critical. But I mean, you acknowledge right up front that you've become a paid spokesman for some of the companies in the book. Why did you cross that line?
Yeah, I really thought about that. I thought about it a lot. As a am I an author? Am I a journalist? Am I an advocate? And my feeling is that I get behind companies that I really happen to believe in. So my feeling is that as with the books, with hopefully now with this TV show, I mean, I view my role as the ability to shine a spotlight on products and services that can help individuals make better choices, and also really help shine a spotlight on the companies, because I want to see our economy transform. So if I can say, for example, I'm a spokesperson for Greenworks Natural Cleaners. Greenworks is a brand that's owned by Clorox. Some people might, they'll have different reactions to that, but my feeling is that needs to be known. And one of the exciting opportunities for me, and I actually write about this in the book, which is a little bit unusual for a green lifestyle book, the last chapter is all about green jobs. Because I think where you spend at least a third of your waking life has very much to do with your lifestyle. And what's interesting about Greenworks is that now if you're working in this division at Clorox, you have a green job. If you're in a marketing role, or if you're in operations at that factory, or if you're an engineer, or you're formulating that product, or you're selling it into stores, you're promoting change. And I want to get behind that, because I want to see more companies really, really take substantive steps. And I feel like if I'm upfront about it and I'm open about it, that's the best I can do.
It's a little tough, and I know you're coming from a business background as opposed to a journalism background. But when you start writing these books, I think you start giving the perception of an authority and of certain walking the line on such. But don't you worry about your credibility as an authority by getting paid by some of these companies? I mean, especially, I'll give you an example, and
okay.
It's funny because you mentioned it yourself. I had a marketing expert on a couple weeks ago who we were talking about the seeming disconnect between Clorox being not well thought of by environmentalists for bleach and that kind of thing,
right.
Buying Greenworks, which is kind of the opposite, and that a lot of people think that there's a disconnect there in their corporate suite, because
right.
they don't seem to see that they're it's like mixing good and evil in some people's minds. Right. Isn't there some possibility that some people would think that you're being used by these companies to give them credibility?
Well, I would say that I think it's a really interesting point. First of all, Clorox introduced Greenworks. They didn't buy Greenworks, but they did buy Burt's Bees. So
okay.
I know.
I'm sorry. That's the company. I'm sorry.
I know what you're saying.
My apologies to Clorox.
Here's what I find. What I think is challenging, and I think is really important. I think, there may be people who will say that that will have different viewpoints on what I'm doing. But my feeling is that we as a country and as a society have to get a little bit more comfortable operating in a gray area. And the gray area is we have to transform our economy. And that means that companies have to start doing better things. They have to start taking better environmental steps. And the challenge is that companies can't do that all at once. They simply can't. I mean, as they're beholden to their shareholders or whoever their stakeholders may be, there has to be a financial logic for what they do, or they can be sued. I mean, that's just simply the way the laws are set up in our country. We could try and change those laws. That might be helpful. But my feeling is beyond that, I do feel like it's challenging for people to say, I am going to applaud a company for where they do good and still hold them accountable for where they have clearly more steps they need to take. That is a tension that is, I think many of us prefer to see things in black and white and say, oh, that company is terrible, or oh, this company is great. And, if we're going to really transform and we're going to transition to a sustainable economy, we're going to have to live with sometimes some situations that might make us a little bit uncomfortable along that road.
Well, let's change gears a little bit. I don't want to weigh you down with too much with that, but because you talk about it right at the beginning of the book that you're paid spokesman for some companies. I thought, I think we need to address that.
Sure.
One of the frustrations I think some people have with choosing green products is finding out later that they aren't as green as they thought, and I wondered if that had happened to you along the way.
Well, I think there's certainly the challenge of trying to decipher and really figure out what choices are better for the planet than the conventional choices that we typically make today. Sometimes you get thrown with a real kind of like curveball that you didn't see coming, and this actually it started happening a couple of years ago with, take compact fluorescent light bulbs, where environmentalists, we still promote them because they're so energy efficient compared to incandescent light bulbs, what we typically use today. I was giving a talk and someone in the audience said to me, well, yeah, but what about the mercury inside compact fluorescent light bulbs? And I said, what are you talking about? Because I didn't know. And she's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's mercury. I just read a report about that. And then suddenly within the next couple of months, bam, everyone's talking about mercury in light bulbs. And it's like, that's very challenging and frustrating for people. And it's challenging and frustrating for people who are in the green movement trying to promote it because, again, it comes back to saying, are there perfect choices? Well, maybe there aren't so many perfect green choices, but to me, I feel like what we ought to be focusing on is saying, can I make a choice that's substantively better, or let's say less harmful to the environment than the conventional choice I'm making today? Recognizing that there are very few perfect choices that exist. And I say that also because, for two reasons. One, because we are really at the beginning of this movement. I mean, we are truly at the beginning of all of the change that is going to need to take place. So to talk about solutions that are 100% perfect it's not really relevant because we're so far from that. The other thing is that, we have to, of course, scientists will talk about the level that we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by. We can look at our air quality or all the chemicals we're pumping into our food and really see challenges all across the place, environmental challenges, health challenges. But the reality is that Mother Nature can also process waste. Nature processes waste naturally, frankly. So we don't have to get to some sort of perfect nirvana where we create zero waste, where we have zero impact, because that's not necessarily necessary. So my feeling is we have to try and get as close to, we have to try and bring balance to our lifestyles. We have to try and figure out how do we move our lifestyles toward balance with nature and making better choices, which might not be perfect choices, which I think goes back to your question about finding out later that something might not be as green as we thought it is. Yeah, that's frustrating, but I still think we have to move forward and say, can I make a better choice tomorrow than I made today?
Well, I'm glad actually that you brought up the CFLs. I was going to ask you about that because they're the green, so-called green lighting. It's a big issue in our house where my efforts to convert to all CFLs has caused big arguments. My wife hates the light that they give off. And, of course, being in the store, she keeps saying, she's for the idea, but she hates the light. And she says, aren't there some of these that, that do have a different light or whatever, and reading the labels on these things is incredibly confusing. Well, this one equals this, and this is a bright white light, this one is a soft white. Who the hell knows what they're talking about?
I completely agree. And I think that it can be very frustrating for people as they try to make these kinds of choices. We actually, on my TV show, one of the things that I green people in different walks of life, and one of the segments I actually did with my brother. who also happens to be someone in his personal habits, kind of like me, a little bit lazy, not green. So we came into his house, and one of the things I said was like, hey, there's these newer compact fluorescent light bulbs. They're dimmable. I know that's been one of your big issues with the compact fluorescent light bulbs, especially the overhead lights. You can't dim them. And the light quality's better. Why don't you try them? And I'll come back next week and see what you think. So I come back the following week, and I had given him just a few, and I come back, and I'm like, so what do you think? And he's like, well, they're in. He's like, they're really bright. He's like, but now they're too bright. Before they weren't bright enough. Now they're too bright, right? He's like, you can dim them. I'm like, so you put these 3 in here? He's like, no, I put them in all around my house. And I said, well, why'd you do that? He's like, well, you told me to. And I'm like, well, if you don't like them, why don't you take them out? He's like, well, they're in. I'm kind of too lazy to take them out. Which was classic, because I just think, well, that's how many of us are. But at least the light quality was such that it wasn't so terrible that he was going to take them out. But I do think that, to your point, Bob, it's still challenging to figure out, which are the best ones, which ones are going to work the best, and why can't we have some just very clear information so we can make a better choice? Hopefully that information's starting to come in different areas, but again, this is kind of why I say I feel like we're still in the beginning of this whole process, because at some point it will become clearer, because consumers will demand it, and somehow industry or government, someone will respond and say, here are the standards, here's what you need to look for, here's how you can make a really good choice. That will happen. It's just there is some frustration right now.
That was all very interesting, Josh, but I have to go back to the point where you said that your brother is lazy like you are, and I'm thinking, Mom and Dad must be so proud.
Well, we're all down here in Asheville, North Carolina, where my folks moved to for a little family holiday. So, my folks have finally. My mom's got in a Brita. She actually put in compact fluorescent light bulbs. She's getting on the train. But we grew up, and I think, Bob, this is why I probably have the perspective that I have. It's because we grew up being a very socially conscious family, really talking about dinner issues at the dinner table. When I was a kid, my folks made me and my brother do bake sales for different parts, people in different parts of the world who were struggling to raise money. We were to some degree, we were raised with a really strong set of values, but the environment was not one of those values. And now it's trying to say to a lot of, I just feel like sort of regular, normal Americans, all right, guys, you love your family, you're pursuing your career, you're really busy, kids have soccer practice, all of these things we know are going on. How are we going to make it easy for people to make better choices for the planet, given the fact that we have so many priorities in our lives? And as much as we want to go green, we just might not, it might not be a question of lazy, although I think sometimes it is, but I think it's a question of we're just really busy, or we haven't really thought about it enough. So the question is, my folks are, I'm trying to get my folks to come around too.
So you're not entirely lazy.
No, but there was a Prius in the driveway, so I'm proud of them for that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, one more thing I want to ask you about before we send you on your green way, and that is one of my favorite green ideas in the new book is for and this is reality, but it's a great idea, for the 3-wheeled vehicle with its own solar panels. I thought, man, that is brilliant. Who wouldn't want engineers to and I took it a step further. I'm thinking, who wouldn't want engineers to find a way of retrofitting their current cars with solar panels? How obvious a development is that?
Well, hopefully it is an obvious development. The solar panels are becoming more affordable, so the technology is getting better. So it may be something where, in fact, I think the 2010 Prius will have a solar panel option to help with things like cooling, the air conditioning. What's really exciting is that you're talking about a car called the Aptera, and
right.
And there's a contest that's going to take place next year. There's over 111 teams around the world that are competing in something called the Progressive Auto X Prize. And what this is going to be is actually a road rally in 4 cities around the United States where cars that get the equivalent of 100 miles per gallon, so some of them might be electric, some of them might run on regular gasoline, some might be, even hydrogen, who knows. But cars that get that equivalent will race in these different cities, and the one that has, I think it's the combination of best mileage and best time, is going to win a multi-million-dollar prize. And the idea is to jumpstart this whole industry and not wait for the big automobile companies to try and figure it out, but really say, you know what? There's so many smart people around this world who have really innovative ideas, and we're going to make this happen now. We don't have time to wait. And they've used this competition as a way to harness the ingenuity and the innovation of lots and lots of people. So I believe the website is auto.xprize.org if folks want to check that out.
Cool. Well, I want to tell everybody that you can order Josh Dorfman's books, The Lazy Environmentalist and The Lazy Environmentalist on a Budget, at great bookstores everywhere or online at Amazon.com or MrMedia.com. You can also check out Josh's website, www.lazyenvironmentalist.com. That's solid, lazyenvironmentalist.com. And then, Josh, when does the new show hit Sundance?
So the new show is part of the Sundance's block of environmental programming called The Green, and this show will air June 16th. It's a Tuesday at 9 p.m. We did 7 half-hour episodes for season 1, and so yeah, that's on Sundance Channel. You can actually see more at sundancechannel.com/thegreen, and it should be pretty fun, entertaining as well as informative.
Excellent. Well, Josh, thanks for giving us a lazy shot of green on Mr. Media today. Appreciate your time.
Bob, terrific talking to you.
All right, good luck with the new book.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. And folks, for more green interviews, surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversation with the editor of The Green Guide, and much more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, MySpace, Facebook, High5, Tag, Bebo, Orkut, Digital Journal, Podcast Pickle, Vox, Pointer Online, iGoogle, Yahoo, Folio, Mediafly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast, or Odeo. Yeah, it's in a lot of places. You notice that? Subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman.com. That's ANDELMAN. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. I always appreciate when you give up a piece of your day to spend it with us. Thanks for listening, everybody.